Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you to those of you who've come in person. It's wonderful to see real people at last and not on a screen, but we're also joined by quite a few people on Zoom. So today we're here to launch the big survey we've done with small and medium-sized companies. As you will know, that's why you're here. And my name's Louise Smith. I'm the director of Aura in this amazing building. And with me are Andy Parkinson, who is the CEO of Lampada Digital Services, who carried out the survey for us, and Sarah Clark, who's the operation manager of Aura. So we're delighted to, it's been quite a long time coming. With the twin challenges of COVID and Brexit, this has been a hard time for all companies, but particularly small and medium-sized companies. And we're so impressed with the amount of response that we've had. We've had 650 companies. You've taken the time to fill in the survey, which means that the data that we have gathered is statistically relevant for the 31,000 small and medium-sized companies in this region, both north and south of the Humber. So that is a very good start, and thank you so much for taking that time. It's a timely launch. Many of you will have been hearing the words net zero ad nausea as we prepare for the UN Climate Change Conference to take place in Glasgow at the beginning of November. The government also talking about levelling up in this region, and we're also leading the country, I think, on renewable technologies. We've got the largest wind farms off our coasts. We've got other technologies as hydrogen, carbon capture, and others here right in our region. I think the other thing to remember is this is a region where innovation happens. I think we forget that sometimes, and that's what we're here to do, because it's through innovation and smart thinking that we're going to be able to make changes to our organizations and meet net zero targets by 2050. So without more ado, Andy's going to take us through the findings of the survey. And then Sarah will talk a bit more about what that means for us. But there will be a Q&A session for both those of us joining us on Zoom and from the audience. So please think up some hard questions for Andy particularly. Anyway, Andy.
Thanks, Louise. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I'm going to try and stand still for the first time ever, I think, while I do this. I usually like to move around, and yeah, and good morning to everyone that's online as well. These hybrid events are becoming a new norm now. I think that we're going to have to get used to this just for the time being. But yeah, no, really good to be here. And just before we launch into some of the findings and we share that with you, I just wanted to sort of talk a little bit about the context around this. So, you know, why have we done this? Why in this region? And actually, why do we think this is of national sort of significance as we go forward as well? So, again, there are a few of you that will know this narrative, but we just remind ourselves about why the Humber. You know, why the Humber is so important. You know, internationally to this transition to the government's ambitions here in the UK for achieving net zero by 2050. And let's remind ourselves again that the role of the port and the estuary is really, really important. So when you think about the amount of emissions that get generated by big industry, those sort of big industry players like steel making and cement making and chemicals and all of these sort of heavy industry, these hard to abate sectors, they're all here because of the port and the estuary. That's why they're here. So that means that the Humber actually is the highest carbon emitting industrial cluster in the UK for that reason. So, you know, when you look around the world and you look at that internationally, 60% of the world's population lives around ports and estuaries or close to water, and 2/3 of the world's biggest cities are essentially close to water through ports and estuaries. So if you want to solve global climate change, then you have to do it in these regions around the world. They are critical. And that really led us on to, you know, why SMEs and what role do they play in this region and, of course, on that international stage as well. And people might not realise that for SMEs, 99.1%, depending which data you use, but 99% plus of all UK businesses are SMEs, essentially. So, you know, you're probably familiar with that stat. They employ about 60% of the workforce in this country, and they generate about half of all of the UK turnover. So SMEs are critical to the UK economy. And of course, when we consider them from an emissions perspective, over half of all business emissions now are generated by SMEs. So again, like consumers, like what we are, the aggregation of all of this is really important by sector. So we need SMEs on this journey. So that led me really to talk about the research. And I've got my slides here actually, and really the objectives about what we were trying to achieve with this. So we felt there's still a big gap in understanding where small businesses are at, on this journey towards net zero. So if you think about the research that we've structured today, we struggle to find similar pieces of research that have been done around the country. So we spent quite a bit of time looking for this before we commissioned this research. But of course, there was very limited insight and evidence around what are SMEs doing in this space, what activities are they actually participating in, what are the challenges that they have. Do they have particular barriers? What would motivate SMEs to get involved in this net zero agenda? And then some other things around, what do people actually think about it? What investments are they planning? And so on and so forth. So as you can see here, that the key objectives of this survey was to really get a sort of deeper understanding of where businesses are at on this agenda. You're going to see absolutely in the next 2 or 3 years a huge shift in policy at a national level. We're going to see an acceleration of how do we legislate and how do we start to push businesses in this direction. And our argument with this research, as you'll see, is that there's a hell of a lot more work to do yet before we can achieve that. So SMEs absolutely hold the key to climate change as well, and that's what we've done. So to the research, what we've done is as Louise mentioned, we've surveyed 650 businesses. So that's a really fantastic result for a regional survey. It's an incredibly representative sample. So we did a lot of work to make sure that the businesses that we talked to were a really a cross section of all the businesses that sit in the region. The Humber has about 30,000 SMEs. That's the sort of number that we're talking about here. And the splits that we've achieved, we're absolutely there or thereabouts. So we've got businesses on both north and south bank of the Humber. What I would also say that's really important about this survey is it was a mixed method. So we made sure that we accessed every type of business we could, because there's often a lot of bias when you do research, that if you have a sort of self-selection or self-selection to research, the people that do it are the people that are interested. So you miss the kind of real, kind of core audiences. So we didn't do that with this. We sent interviews out, face-to-face interviews, telephone interviews, and we've actually got a fantastic sample. And really pleasing is that 75% of the people that we've talked to were the business owner themselves, or they were a senior director in that business. So we've talked to the people running those companies, and I think that's critical, as you'll see as we go through. So, headline findings. What we're going to do is just very briefly talk today. I mean, you can imagine with this research, there is mountains of data and charts and everything else. So we're not going to do that today, although I would have done. I mean, I would have quite happily stood here today, done 4-hour session on going through all the charts. But no, I think we need to summarize it for you so you get a handle on the themes. So these are the 6 themes that sort of come out of the survey, and we're going to just talk through them very briefly, kind of one at a time. But just to run through them quickly now. The first one then is all about attitude. And what we found in this research is that the attitude of that business owner is one of the single most important things that will determine whether that business is actually going to be participating in activities to lower their emissions. We can look at a whole bunch of different things. We can look, as you'll see as we go through, we look at barriers, we can look at legislation, we can look at, sort of funding, all of this thing. But the attitude of that individual or those people running that business is the single most important thing that will determine whether that business is actually going to do activity and participate in this. So we were a bit surprised to some extent about that. We've got to remember that smaller business in particular behave like prosumers, so that they're very much in that space. But this attitudinal point was pretty critical, and it raises lots of interesting questions then around how, at a national level, how do we encourage businesses to get involved? Well, you've got to work on this attitudinal point first. We've got to get people to understand why they want to do it and to be motivated them to do it. So what's really pleasing about the research is that 80% of businesses now are agreeing that they have a responsibility. So we're seeing a high level of businesses accepting now that, we must do something as a business. That doesn't necessarily mean they're doing things, but it means that there's an acceptance that they want to do something. I suspect if we'd have run this survey 5 years ago, that number would have been probably half that, maybe even less. So I think that's a positive point. And as we go through this, you'll see the importance that attitude keeps coming through. Yeah, thanks very much. So lots of case studies, which we'll come back to. We've got lots of sort of qualitative data in here as well. And, we've got gyms and people like that, owners of those saying, well, I don't even really know what low carbon means, So you can imagine the language and the terminology here is really, really important. So the next kind of headline that we got out of this is this sort of, what motivates you to get involved? So we asked some quite specific questions around, what's going to motivate you to try and get your business into a more climate friendly place? And the single biggest driver that businesses told us was it was to save money. So cost saving was the biggest driver. Yeah, if it saves me money, then I want to get involved in this. So the challenge with that is that when you look at all of the activities that an SME could do, so if I sat with a business today and said, right, here's a list of 15 things that you could do, when we go through that list, not a lot of it is going to save you money in the short term. So one of the key issues I think we uncovered here is that whilst, yes, long term, investing in sustainability will return at some point, but those business cases for small businesses maybe don't stack up in the short term. And examples like, if I move my small business to a renewable energy supplier right now, that's probably going to cost more than the cheapest energy tariff on the market. And let's say I've got to take my small fleet of vans to electric, the cost of that is going to be quite significant compared to running, small cheap diesel vans. So this issue comes out a lot, and I think it's a big issue of national significance. Actually, the cost of the next cheapest alternative, particularly for small businesses, will always be very prominent. So a lot of messaging's been done around this from central government that you need to do this because it'll save you money. But actually, we need to really be thinking now about how we help SMEs with those kind of long-term investment decisions, because in the short term, a lot of that activity will cost you more money. So that's a real challenge that we've got here. So when we talk about the third headline then, and we looked at, awareness. So we've asked the question, as you can imagine, like, are you aware of the government's ambition to, well, it's not an ambition, it's actually setting legislation, to achieve this net zero sort of result by 2050, and do you actually understand what it means? And actually, quite unsurprisingly, I think that only 58% of businesses were aware of it or understood it. So, there's still a lot of work to do here just around awareness and raising awareness. So, I think this is a key target for us, that we must get awareness levels up around what it is, what it means, and actually in the detail that sits behind it around what can your business actually go and do. And that's quite critical. The reason why it's so important is that, if I put my marketing hat back on from back in the day, when we're selling a product, of course, what we want to do is we want to get everyone to be aware of it first. So brand awareness of an issue is really important. And I don't know if you've seen the marketing funnels, and you kind of work your way through, people consider it and then they take action. So getting awareness levels up is really important, because we often see a link between awareness and action. And what I'm really pleased to report in this survey is that it absolutely pulls through in the research, that the businesses in this survey that were more aware, understood this target, were 3 times more likely to be actually doing something on the ground. So they were actually more likely to be doing it. And the range of the activities that we're doing was quite comprehensive. So we determined them as what we call fully active in doing this. So really important that we get awareness levels up, because of course there isn't always a link between awareness and action. And many years ago, I was involved with smoking cessation and trying to help sort of health trusts sort of reduce smoking levels in communities. And of course, awareness is really high about the sort of the dangers of that, but the action was very limited. So it's a good positive result that businesses are we're proving in the research. If your awareness is there and your attitude is there, those businesses will take action. And that's a key point about how we develop this going forward. So knowledge is everything, and many businesses told us that in a lot of the qualitative feedback as well. The more we know, the more we can do. And it was as simple as that. So the next one then, we wanted to specifically look at the kind of national policy kind of framework around this, and what's coming out from Boris and Number 10 and everything else. And this sort of, we've got a number of things going on in the economy at the moment, as we know, with this pandemic and the pandemic recovery, and government are very much now looking at how we're going to build this country back. So you might be heard this phrase, build back greener, which is something that's coming out of Number 10. There's a lot of conversation as well around post-pandemic economic recovery, and how these climate agenda links to the pandemic, and how we drive this forward. So we were particularly keen to look at do we have any businesses right now in the Humber that were heavily affected by the pandemic and actually want to build back greener? And that number comes out about 14%. So there is a small sort of section in this research where businesses are saying we're building back greener now, we're recovering from the pandemic. Yeah, help us. What can we do right now? So 14% at a kind of Humber level of 30,000 businesses, 14% at 6 million businesses in the UK becomes quite a big number. So this is something we'll be taking forward with BEIS in central government around, are there case studies in here that we can work with, because we think this is an opportunity. And of course, it should be said that whilst we did ask about the pandemic impact, not every business, of course, was badly affected by the pandemic. We spoke to lots of businesses who've been very positively affected by the pandemic. And actually what that was doing was it was giving them the opportunity and investment and funds potentially to do more. So it didn't just work from a negative perspective, it also has an opportunity from a positive perspective. We've now, there's a large business that's in the survey that they're not an SME actually, but we excluded them from the results, but they were keen to complete it. And because of the boom that they've experienced during the pandemic, they now are investing heavily in sustainability. The time has come for them. So it's a positive thing. Thanks very much. So we then move on to another headline that comes out of this research about, what we were trying to identify was, have we got business in this sample that are early adopters? So who are the people that are right now fully active in this agenda, businesses that are doing just loads of stuff, they get it, they want to do more. And we absolutely have. So it's about 22% of the sample would fall into what we would determine as this kind of super duper kind of, active sort of business. And that's really, really encouraging. But what we also found was that there's a lot of businesses in there asking us that we want to talk to those types of people. So this kind of peer-to-peer thing becomes really, really important. If you're a small business that wants to know, well, what are businesses like mine doing on this space, there's a huge opportunity to build this kind of peer-to-peer sort of sharing opportunity and networking, because it's a real challenge. And we also found that a lot of the big businesses, and this is quite a critical point, the bigger businesses in the survey were much more likely to be undertaking activities around carbon reduction that was more management focused. So what I mean by that is that they were more likely to be doing ISO 14001, more likely to be measuring their carbon, more likely to be, doing those kind of management quality framework sort of things. That was almost non-existent in small businesses, which is not so much a surprise. But again, it makes the point about mentoring, and that big businesses have a huge responsibility, we think, in actually supporting SMEs, smaller businesses, particularly in their supply chains, but more broadly than that as well. They have the resources and they have the ability to do that. So a huge opportunity there. And then, next slide as well. And then we get to the kind of final headline around this, which is around funding. So we asked some quite particular questions about, how would you finance some of these activities? How have you financed these activities? And of course, unsurprisingly, I think to some extent, we find that finance is a barrier. So a third of all businesses said finance is a barrier. And a lot of feedback in the research that the complexity of existing funding is a real challenge. Lack of awareness, we don't actually know that the funds exist. When we do know that those funds exist, they're really complex to access, they take too long, so that there's a lot of that in that space. What I do want to say about this, and just link back to the very first headline that we talked about attitude, is that we've got clear evidence in this survey that the businesses that were fully active and attitudinally were in the right place were not financing this through government grants or through any kind of financing in that space. They were financing it from their own balance sheets. So attitude is so important in getting business into this space, because once they want to do it and they understand it, they will do it, and finance becomes less of a barrier. So on the face of it, you would clearly there's work to do around the financing, but again, it shows the importance of awareness and attitude in that those businesses will get there. So that's that. So we've kind of given you a very, very quick sort of round 6 headlines there. There's a lot more obviously that sits behind this. I think where we're going next with this, we've got kind of 2 or 3 key objectives about what we want to achieve, because clearly from just a regional level, sat in this region, we've got some great insight now into SMEs, and what we'll be doing is working with partners and collaborating with lots of different people about how we get our own kind of SME sort of audience driven forward. So we're very, very keen to do that. And then I think we've got a national perspective that we want to really get into the debate around, well, actually, the Humber is this fantastic location for kind of testing things and piloting things because of the nature of what we've got. So how do we drive a national debate now around the role that SMEs play in climate change? And should this research be repeated? Should we be doing this at a national level? And those sort of conversations which are underway. So I'll pass over to Louise, who will walk you through some of the next steps. Or Sarah. Or one of them.
In fact, Sarah.
It's going to be Sarah.
It's going to be me.
Right, and Sarah will just talk a little bit about, I think, the facility here and the role that that's going to play.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. Morning, everyone. Just wanted to point out, it's not a prerequisite to wear pink shoes if you work for Aura. Just happened that, we're so stylish together that, we chose the colours that we did. So I'm just going to rattle through a little bit about why the Innovation Centre, why the university. I mean, Andy's talked a lot about kind of that national level and the regional level. So why the University of Hull? Why Aura? Why the Aura Innovation Centre? Well, this facility here and the purpose of Aura and the AIC is to bring businesses together, bring academic expertise together, to help businesses to collaborate and learn from each other. So a lot of the things that we've just heard about. I don't know if you want to put the recommendations up rather than just my name, because, I know it's difficult to see, but I think people online will be able to see it probably a bit better. This space, this facility is an asset for the region. This is why we're here. A lot of the data that's come out and the recommendations is about what we actually do here, what we do as a university and what we do with stakeholders and what our other partners do, so the local authorities, etc. We're here to support businesses on their journey through to net zero. We all know we've got, every single person has got a role to play, whether you are, a one-man band self-employed plumber, or whether you own a, 200 employee manufacturing business. Everybody has got a role to play. And one thing is absolutely for certain, and Andy touched on it, is that regulation is going to hit every business in some form or other. So every business has got to do this. And so, it's kind of like, it's a fait accompli, really. As consumers, we've got to change, and as businesses, we've got to change as well. And we're here to be able to support that. As a university, we are brilliant at innovation. This is one of the things that we really lead on and are incredible at. And we have other sister brands. So we, as well as the Aura Innovation Centre, we have funding that's available for businesses, whether it's accessing grants for things, loans for things. Again, our partners do business loans. But also working with the academic expertise that we have here, or specialist consultants. That's, we can bring that expertise into play for businesses and to be able to kind of learn from each other as well. So the other thing that we're doing here, and because of COVID, we opened back in January 20 and we closed again in March 20. So we had a whole 10 weeks that we were actually operational. But the other thing that we're doing now we're getting into some kind of normality, and it's brilliant to see actual people in this room, and as well as people online. So, we're kind of moving towards this kind of new normal of these hybrid things. But the other thing we're doing in this space is creating an innovation culture. We've got one of our colleagues from Adenic in the room. So Wayne and his colleagues are a new partner of ours who are actually based in the facility, and they will help businesses to collaborate as well as us. So this is us kind of collaborating and making sure that all of our expertise is shared. One thing I did want to touch upon a little bit was about funding, and the last slide that Andy just picked up on about the complexities of funding. I've worked in funding for donkey's years. A lot of my colleagues have. You can see Pauline laughing there. It is exceptionally complicated if you don't know what you're doing. And I've worked in this space for a long time, as have a lot of us. The traditional way that funding has been issued is very silo. But what we're doing here is making sure that those silos are kind of spread about. And so when we're supporting businesses, when we're talking to businesses, we've kind of got one eye on. So we might not necessarily be able to help you with that particular fund, but there are a variety of other funds that we can help you with. And coming here to talk to our experts and our innovation managers and our colleagues will open those doors. So, you know, one thing I would say after this event is come and talk to us, please. We work with loads of different stakeholders that have got lots of different funding available. One thing we do need to do is keep talking to SMEs. SMEs, we need you to keep talking to us so that we're able to pull packages of funding together that meet your needs. So not just necessarily what national government kind of think, because quite often in terms of the kind of grassroots, there's slight disconnect. And so where we want you to be able to tell us this isn't working for us or this is working for us, and we can feed that back into government and into these government departments to make sure that what we're doing for you is actually meeting your needs and meeting your demand. So we want to keep talking, we want you to keep talking to us. And I'll just finish with just a couple of points of information in terms of some events that we've got coming up. So I think we're in this kind of hybrid event is kind of part of the new normal. So you can online, you can come face to face. We've got a couple of events coming up. So the next one is on the 28th of September. So that's 2 weeks today. And that's to talk about the green jobs and skills. And it's a summit that we're hosting here. And again, it's a hybrid event. So it's online and face to face. And that's been able to kind of talk to different sectors and understand different sectors' perspective about what green jobs are. And my view is green jobs are jobs, because in the future, every job has to be green, whatever that means. Because the heavy industry, etc., everything has got to change. So we'd be delighted for you to join us. I think there'll be some links on the screen coming up as to how you can join us for that one. And again, this is about you having your say as businesses. We've also got another one coming up, which is kind of taking this piece of research further on. So this is moving to net zero. So this is kind of the next set of work. And that'll be held on Wednesday, the 20th of October, and that's partway through the Waterline Summit. So again, there'll be a link that you'll be able to join that event. And then following all of these events, of course, COP26 is coming up. If you haven't heard of COP26, then Google it. There's tons of information about it. And this is kind of, this is kind of seen as one of the world's. The world will absolutely be watching the UK in terms of how it's dealing with these kind of issues. So this is a really significant kind of piece of work that's being done globally in Glasgow. So there'll be a lot of negotiations, and as a result of that, over time there'll be a lot of changes to regulations, etc., as things move on. But we've got an event where the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Action Plan will be launched in collaboration with the Yorkshire Post. That's on the 9th of November. And again, it's an event that's open to everybody to join. I think you can join online and face to face. It's going to be held in Leeds. But this will basically kind of set the scene as to say, what this area is going to be doing and supporting and helping not just businesses, but on the social side as well, to be able to help every person understand what it is that they need to do going forward. So I will finish on that. I know I've gone over time, so apologies, but I do.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Right, so we're going to open up now for some Q&As. I don't know if anyone's burning to ask some questions that hopefully we can answer in the room. Otherwise, we will ask our online colleagues if they have. Anyone with... Oh, Diana. Oh, sound, hang on.
There's a roving mic.
Sound boom is coming. Brian with the lady in the blue.
I'm not going to miss that one, am I? Thank you very much. A really fascinating talk and really great to see the results out. Going back to the very first point that Andy put out there, this is all about the attitude and the behaviours behind it. What are the next steps so that we really accelerate our attitudes within the region so that we can really build on the SME base? So what are the actions and what are we doing as the businesses here, but as Aura, as the university, so that we can really embrace the behavioural changes that are needed?
Right, well, I'll start and then I might hand over to Andy or Sarah. I think collaboration, I know we say that quite glibly, but if we don't work together and connect it all up, nothing's going to change. And I think we're not always that great at doing that here. So that's going to be a first step, because there's lots of things happening. They're just disconnected and complex. So we need to do something by working together. And we work very closely with Marketing Humber. Diana's from Marketing Humber. So I think that's a first step. I think we need to mindfully start explaining what this means, because I think we're talking at very general terms now, but what does it actually mean in practice for an SME in this region to start their net zero journey, for those that haven't started? Did you want to add anything, Andy?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, that, because we can do the standard approach, and we can do what we always do, and governments are good at this, and we'll build websites for SMEs, and it'll take 15 years to shift attitudes, and we can do all that way. And I think that the question is more for me around how do you accelerate the attitudes? How do you do this quickly? And that's where we always struggle, you know. I think with policy struggle in that space and everything else. So there's a really interesting behavioural science piece involved with this that we don't usually deploy at this kind of level. And I'll just give you an example of the pandemic. So when I don't know if you've been following the kind of SAGE committee and the advisors, and you get little snippets from the press about what's going on in those meetings. But the behavioural scientists got it fundamentally wrong around the social acceptance of mask wearing and social distancing in lockdowns. So they said, nobody will do it. Right, and then within 2 months, we're all doing it. So it can be done quickly, but we need to be thinking around, you know, what can we do then with, you know, with SMEs, and how do you get those attitudes shifted quickly? What are those things that you can do? Because otherwise, we will get there, but it'll just take a long time. And there's some amazing stuff that comes out of the government. I mean, we found this Cabinet Office SME Hub website. It's really interesting. You go on, and some of the businesses in the Humber are on it. But you just think, well, 30,000 businesses will never find that or go on it. So how do you accelerate that? And I think that's the question that, you know, I'd be more interested in. How do we debate that, and how do we accelerate the behavioural science intervention bit? Because I think that's quite exciting if you could do that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, working in progressive ways, I mean, there's a desire for mentoring. And I think if we can get the larger companies, because there's always a lot of attention on the 2 top tiers of the supply chain. So the big shiny SMEs who always get all the money and have people who can actually sit and write bids or apply for funding. But I think if we can work with them and find new ways, rather than just say, oh, well, fill in this huge form to get onto a preferred supplier database. I think if we try and move away from that and build relationships and work together to find the best way to do that, because Andy mentioned ISO 14001. Well, I've worked for an SME, and filling in one of those things takes weeks. And then you get audited every year, and it's just a huge amount of time, and it's perhaps not appropriate for a company of 10 people. So how do we come up with ways of building green credentials that are, you know, valid, but not taking weeks to do, and then taking huge time to audit, and then it becomes a box ticking exercise rather than making real change. Sarah, did you have anything to add?
I think just to kind of finish that off, Diana, and again, you know, cracking question. I think one of the things that we all found is that the choice of language that we use, and I'm kind of talking at the broad we that work in the public sector and what have you, is often just not heard. It's, you know, it's kind of white noise. So we have a role to change the way that we talk about various things. And one of the roles that the Yorkshire and Humber Climate Commission are looking at the moment is exactly that. And so it's kind of linked into this kind of behavioural science kind of piece, which is about being able to help everybody, whether it's a business owner or a retired school teacher, what this thing actually means, you know, what climate change actually means, and what it means to every single individual. And I think, you know, we need to kind of get our heads around that. And clearly it's not one size fits all at all. And you know, and we all have to do that. And I think, you know, certainly we're getting better at doing that, but we've got somewhere to go. But we need to get a shift on with it, because things are changing exceptionally quickly.
We have a question from online, from the online audience, and they're asking, what sort of things are you already doing through Aura to get SMEs on the net zero journey
So we're working with lots of different businesses through Aura and through our colleagues with other funding projects and other consultancy that we're working on. So things of the nature of using waste for energy, which is quite an obvious one, but it's about it's kind of looking at the different properties that particular types of waste from different sectors can be used to kind of be part of the circular economy. Cleaning air, so using different filters, reducing kind of heavy metals from various different products and services in terms of kind of manufacturing and replacing them with much cleaner products. There's all sorts of different things that we're involved in, and so we've got some of our kind of innovation managers and some of our colleagues from stakeholder organisations in the room as well. We've got over 200 projects underway at the moment across the university for various different things, and this is what kind of going back to what I was saying earlier. As a university, we have a huge amount of expertise and academic experience with reducing carbon. And so it's kind of the role of our teams to be able to put businesses in front of these experts who kind of sit in rooms and bury their head in their amazing research, and they're delivering some really world-class pieces of work, but not necessarily exposed to businesses. So that's kind of part of our role, to bring the academic expertise to business and to collaborate.
Great. Well, we have another question from online from Liz Sellers, who's in the agricultural business. And she says, well, how can she begin to collaborate with us here at the Aura Innovation Centre? I'm looking at my innovation managers who do a lot with the agricultural sector. Do you want to take that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've probably answered it already. It's come and talk to us, get in touch, leave your details through the online system, and one of our team will get back to you. Across our various different projects, we have more than 12 innovation managers, and they are account managers for business. So there's plenty of them.
And I think there's a couple of case studies on our website as well, using drone technology and using P-waste and that sort of thing. So there's lots to do, and the agricultural sector is very big here in the Humber. So yes, come and talk to us. Oh, question from the room. Wayne.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask, what does the panel feel about what businesses can learn from the COVID pandemic and apply to the green situation in terms of behavioural change? You've talked about behavioural change, and this is a crucial part across all elements. But we've had a lot of disruption from the last 18 months, and we're still kind of going through that disruption. And there's been a lot of change that's had to happen rather rapidly in reaction to it. How can businesses use that as a positive and take learnings from it and apply it to the carbon situation?
Yes, I think, thank you, Wayne. I think if you'd said this to us 3 years ago, we'd have, I remember the university when we locked down, they said, oh no, well, Teams will be rolled out over 2 years. And then within 2 months, they had us all up on Teams. So it just goes to show when you've got no choice and your back's against the wall, what you can do. I think all of us know it's extraordinary what we've managed to do online, which we never thought would be possible. I think so technology has taken a leap forward, although those in technology are probably saying, yeah, we already knew that, and we were telling you that for a long time. So Andy, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
I think it's the million-dollar question, Wayne, that one. I mean, it's the Greta narrative, isn't it? That what we've got right now is a climate emergency, but we're not treating it as an emergency. Whereas a pandemic, we treat it as an emergency, and as I referenced earlier, social acceptance, these behavioural attitudes shift very quickly, and I think that's part of the answer here. Is we've got to up the ante in terms of treating this as a real emergency situation, and it won't. It's not going away, is it? I mean, I'm just thinking the last 6 weeks alone. I'm thinking back to floods in Berlin. I'm thinking to Louisiana. I think the whole chemicals cluster went under, and there was huge fuel shortages there. So these wildfires that have been now in California, so this thing carries on, and I think only until we get that point of emergency, it will make it easier to do that thing you're alluding to there, Wayne, around how do you actually then get businesses to sort of come and support it in that way. But it's difficult. I don't know the answer. I just wish I did, but I don't. Yeah, we need to keep working that one out.
And we've got a question from online from Tracy Turner, who wants to know what other routes to funding, fast routes to funding. So I know that my colleagues from the Spark Fund are here in the room, and when we had Biz Week a few months ago, we had some amazing case studies, and I remember one I was particularly keen on because it was in the fashion industry. Bombix, who is an entrepreneur who started her company building some software, which of course it lowers the amount of time to take from concept to the shop floor. And I think she was one of those. We talked about how to fund it and how complex it was, but I think working with our innovation managers, whether it's through Aura, the Spark Fund, Flood Innovation, or knowledge transfer partnerships, having that person walking with you, going to meetings with you, and looking at your particular circumstances of what kind of grant and funding would be most appropriate for your idea or your business. So Sarah, I don't know if you want to add anything on the funding.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. It's using the expertise that we have in the room and and online to be able to support going through each of those kind of bespoke routes, because that's exactly what they are. Businesses are individual businesses, and there is no kind of set of stuff, if you like, that can be applied every time to every business, because it's just not appropriate. And our innovation managers are business development. They're from industry. They fully understand how businesses operate and run, and are on your side to be able to make a difference.
Yeah, and I think working with the local authorities who all have business support systems and business managers, I think we need to all connect it up. I think we all need to work harder to connect it up and make it easier for SMEs who are busy doing what they're excellent at. They don't necessarily have lots of people sitting there filling in lots of forms. Phil, you had a question.
I just wanted to pick up on two of the points that Andy made. One was about the funding, and the other was about actually what drives people to actually go ahead with this. And the initial answer was cost. Well, I manage the Hull Business Energy Efficiency Scheme, and we've just had a recent case that's completed. It's actually on our website, so it's in the public domain. Elverington's Limited, 15,000 square foot of office and workshop. They've changed their lighting system. We've given them a grant towards it. It was a project that cost them £48,000. They got a grant of £15,000 towards it. That is going to save them £40,000 a year in electricity costs, but it's also, reducing their carbon footprint by 115 tonnes per annum. So it works both ways as well.
An initial outlay, but a big return on investment.
The return on the investment is paid for itself in less than a year because of the grant.
Right, there you go, yeah. Any more last questions from the room before we close? I think we're actually nearly on time too. Okay, so the report, there is a report, is now available to download from our website at www.aura-innovation.co.uk, and there are also links to our sister businesses, our sister funds as well. So you'll be able to read a summary of what Andy talked us through, why we did it, and then the list of recommendations at the end, which I think we all need to work on together in collaboration, hopefully through this beautiful building, an asset for the region. And again, just to thank all you SMEs who took part, who spent the 8 minutes filling in that survey. We're going to be carrying on doing some pulse surveys, and some of you who are here might like to just fill in. It's 4 questions, which we would like to carry on doing so that we can keep the data up to date and ensure that we continue to provide the right tailored support. Right, so I think that's it. Kelly says that the form is on the touch screen as you go out of the building for those who are here in person. So yes, finishing on time. Thank you so much for taking part today. And for those of you who are here in person, it's very exciting to see you 3D. Thank you also to our online audience, and we hope to be talking to you all soon. So please get in touch. Thank you very much.